Promises kept because promises were made. Isaiah was probably the most famous of the prophets to believe that in some point of God's own time, God would act to redeem not only the nation of Israel, but to act in such a way that redemption would be made for the whole creation. And so it is that as you read the words of Isaiah, you began to get a picture of how it is that God is going to maintain and keep the promise that was made. For from the very beginning, God's whole purpose for everything that God has made is that there should be a sense of harmony and wholeness, a sense of unity within the creation. Not the kind of divisiveness and the brokenness that we seem to see around us each and every day. God's purpose is to somehow build those understandings and those new insights into life that Christ will bring to us if we simply open our hearts and understand what the birth of Jesus truly means, not just for us personally, but for the very world itself. It is without saying that the world needs redemption. And it has from the very moment that Adam and Eve left the garden and began their own journey through this world. In every generation, these words of redemption and new life have meant that we are called and we are blessed with a gift if we but open ourselves to receive it. Even as these two characters from the Gospel of Luke, Anna and her cohort, were rejoicing because they were in the temple when Mary and Joseph brought their new babe for the rites of purification, they saw somehow, because the Holy Spirit gave them the vision to see in Jesus Christ the fulfillment of the promise that God had made. And their hearts rejoiced and they were glad and they felt full and ready to leave this earth because they had seen something for which they had longed so many years. We don't know how long the people of the Old Testament had been proclaiming this new thing that God was going to do. But certainly somehow deep within they knew that what wasn't quite what God had intended. And I think we know that too. As we look out upon the face of the world today, we know that what happens in our world today is not what God intended. When God created the heavens and the earth, when God brought all things into existence, it was for the purpose of somehow being in a sense of harmony and wholeness. Not the kind of brokenness that seems to pervade our world today. And whenever we gather to celebrate the birth of Christ, it's to remind us that God is still at work seeking through Jesus Christ to bring this kind of reality into this world. And we know that as we consider and anticipate what is coming, that in the fullness of God's time, that will happen. Even as the birth of Christ came as a sign that God was still working to bring that kind of peace and harmony into the human family and the creation itself, so in the fullness of God's time, that will indeed happen. So, the people of the Old Testament were waiting. They were waiting. They were waiting. Generation after generation, they held something inside of themselves that said, at some point, God is going to keep the promise that was made. My question to us in our own time is, what are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? How many times have we celebrated Christmas together with, not perhaps this congregation, but throughout the years? How many times have we celebrated the birth of Jesus Christ? And we need to say to ourselves, as we see these two people in the temple, Anna somehow realizing that it has happened. It has happened. The promise has been kept. Why do we wait? Why do we wait? What difference does it make? Will we just simply return to the patterns of our lives after we have rejoiced and been glad in the Christmas celebration? Will we just simply put it on the shelf until it comes around again next year? Are we waiting then so we can have another celebration of the birth? What do we wait for? And when we experience it, what difference does it make to us? You know, we're about to enter into a new year. It's kind of appropriate that this last Sunday of 2017 kind of swings us over tomorrow to 2018, isn't it? Because the real question for us is, if we have been waiting for the birth of Christ, and we have been rejoicing in that birth, what will happen tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, that will show us we have understood what God was doing in Jesus Christ? You know, the newsletter for 2016 had a page in it which said that for the month of January, each day should hold something to give evidence that the birth of Christ had in fact made a difference. That somehow, in some small way, each day, we should set ourselves a goal to say something or do something that indicates the birth of Christ was worth waiting for. And it has transformed us and made us into new beings. That's exactly what Paul was trying to convey to the churches to which he wrote. That we are new creatures in Jesus Christ. We aren't the same person we were yesterday or the day before. Every day is a new creation in Jesus Christ. And we are also new creations in Jesus Christ. So that little calendar for the month of January for 2016, each day had a little suggestion about something each of us might do to give evidence that the birth of Christ has in fact changed us. Something so simple as when you're at the grocery store and you've got a big cart full of groceries and the person behind you has 2 items. What does it make sense to do? Would you like to go ahead? It seems such a simple thing, doesn't it? But it shows like we're thinking about how we can make the world a better place. And every day there are going to be small things that we can do that will somehow indicate to the world and to ourselves even that God in Christ has changed our lives. To simply put Christmas on the shelf for another season is to miss the whole point of the promise that God kept in the birth of Jesus Christ. Now, I'm not suggesting that you don't do that. I'm just saying that as we think about the purpose of the birth of Christ, let's heighten our awareness that there will be opportunities each of the days of this coming year to indicate to the world and to ourselves that this birth has in fact changed us and impacted us in some way. And it's as simple as asking a person if they want to go ahead in the line at a grocery store, or saying a word of hello to somebody that we don't even know as we pass by. There are so many little things, you see, that can make a difference. Or sometimes when we have a coworker and we say, do you need some help with that? On and on and on, these opportunities continue to unfold for us as the days come and go. And every time we take the opportunity, we make the world a better place. And we give evidence that the birth of Christ has indeed made a difference in us. That is what God's hope is for the world in Jesus Christ. So as we go through not just the season of Christmastide, but as we go through the unfolding days until we gather again to once again rejoice and celebrate the birth, make each day count for something. Don't let it pass. Don't let it just go by simply by repeating the routines of every day. Think more deeply about what can we, each of us, do to make this birth a significant event in our own lives and in the lives of people around us. A kind word, a kind deed, a helping hand, some way in which we say, this birth means something to us. And it means something to the world itself. You know, we often talk about, you throw a pebble into a pond, and my grandkids love to come down and go down by the stream behind our house, and they want to skip stones. And they want to see how many little leaps a stone can make before it finally falls into the water. You realize, friends, that we have the opportunity to skip stones every single day. And we'll impact not just the life of someone that we let go ahead in the grocery store, but there's a thing that's been going on called pass it on. When somebody does something that makes a difference for me or for you, we pass it on. And if we could simply embrace that as a way that we anticipate what's going to happen in every single day, it's like that stone skipping across the water. It somehow makes a difference as it continues its journey. When you pass it on, when you do something that makes a difference for one person, if they pass it on, it continues to make a difference for many. Just recently, there's a little thing that goes around the village, and it's a little painted stone that somebody puts on a location. And it's a reminder that somebody was there, and I think it means that they're giving a blessing as the stone you discovered sitting on the steps of the Sunshine Shop or somebody's house. It's a way of saying somebody's thinking about you. Isn't that an interesting concept? You don't need to know who the person is necessarily, but once you see that stone, you begin to think about, well, who could have left it here? And what do they want me to know? That they're thinking of me. That's the way passing on goes, isn't it? The stone shouldn't be left on your doorstep. Where are you going to take it? And where will you leave it so somebody else knows that you're thinking of them? You see, the whole thing about Christmas is that God is thinking of you. God is thinking of me. God is thinking of the very creation itself. And Christ came into the world to remind us how precious this world is to God and how precious each one of us is. So if we simply go back to the routines of our daily existence without really getting an insight into what it is God is trying to say to us, we're missing the whole point. It isn't just about Christmas Day or Christmas Eve. It's about life itself. It's about how do we actually share the good news of Jesus Christ. You know, I often am amazed that we love to sing these carols before Christmas, when in fact they were written as an expression of after Christmas. These were written by people who somehow got an insight into what God was doing in Jesus Christ. And it was their way of expressing the joy and the gladness that they felt in the birth of Jesus and what it meant to the world around us. We tend to sing them all a whole month before we celebrate Christmas. But they were written in a response to what they saw God doing in their lives and in the life of the world itself. That's the way life is meant to be lived. I love to sing the carols. And one year when I was the pastor, I said, well, I'm not going to sing any carols until after Christmas. What an uproar that caused. Because people are so used to singing the carols before Christmas. But I was trying to make a point that somehow these beautiful carols and hymns contain the very hope that all of us have deep within ourselves. And they are meant to be sung as a response to what God has done in Jesus Christ. Now, I'm not about to do that ever again. But it's good for us to think about it from that point of view. These carols contain the hope and the joy and the fulfillment of the promise that was made, about which Isaiah proclaimed and about which Paul wrote of us as children of God. These are the way in which we express that God has done a new thing. Let us pray.